Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of the Lost in Translation podcast. I'm pretty sure you guys are wondering what in the devil is he cooking up tonight? Well, guess what? Tonight's conversation is going to be a conversation that we haven't had in a while. And I wanted to go ahead and share that with you guys. Tonight's conversation is going to be, are you a man or are you a mouse? Basically. Let me explain to you a little bit how I ran across this particular situation. Normally, when I'm reading my Bible, some things are just, just given to me. And tonight's discussion is actually inspired by Ezekiel 18:20. The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, neither shall the father bear the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. So basically, the sins of the father shall visit the sins of the son. So basically, that's tonight's reference. So I'm usually doing a little bit of research from time to time. And I ran across this particular article, and it was very interesting. And it talks about genetics a little bit. Tonight, we're going to be discussing epigenetics and how it ties into today's dating and mating. Is that sometimes we are up against some things we have no idea what we're up against. And sometimes people experience traumas that they're not really, how should I say this, not really aware of. And tonight, I'm going to talk about mice. Normally, researchers like to use mice as a precursor for humans and human behavior. So tonight, I'm going to share a little bit of information with you guys and to show you where I got most of this stuff from so you can see for yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and show you exactly where I got some of this stuff from. So the first one was about a cherry blossom experiment with mice. So I'm going to go ahead and share that with you guys in just a second. Give me just a moment, and I'm going to share this with y'all. Here we go. Just to give you the heads up, this was the cherry blossom experiment. Basically, what it was is that male mice were subjected to electric current running through the bottom of their cage. Now, this made them agitated, of course, and they would jump around during and trying to find, ground without current. Now, the next thing that happened is that they actually introduced the scent of cherry blossoms, and it was piped into the cage whenever the current was turned on. Now, after a while, the mice would jump around and get agitated upon smelling the cherry blossom scent, even when the current was not on. Now, the male mice were put together with the female mice, and they had offspring. Now, the male mice were removed from the next generation that was born. Now, this is where it gets interesting, Now, remember, the female mice were never introduced to the electric shock or electric current. Now, even though the new generation of mice never have seen their fathers or the mothers even knew nothing of the male mice's experiment. Now, the little mice grew agitated. The little mice grew agitated and jumped around when the scent of cherry blossoms was piped into the cage. Now, diseases, addiction, depression, all of that stuff perhaps may have originated from their great-grandparents, and a person's body shape could result in trauma that has been carried on for generations. Not because of the lifestyle choices we all have, our ancestors that may have carried mental and physical pain for hundreds of years and maybe longer. So that led me to my next question. Now, if that is the case, then we could be carrying trauma that we have no idea that we're carrying. And not only that, we're probably introduced to trauma of our own. You know what I'm saying? So we really don't know what's going on. Say, for instance, you get into a bad relationship or whatever, and sometimes those things may cause us to have some type of trauma. I know a lot of times when I'm listening to different podcasts and I'm listening to different people talk, one of the things they've always expressed was they were talking about the particular trauma that they experienced. And sometimes that trauma may be triggered from things that we know of and things that we don't know of. Now, here's the thing that I found interesting, that those baby mice were never introduced to shock. They were never introduced to any trauma like that, but they still carried those stressors anytime they were introduced to that scent. Now, they did that for several generations down the line, and here's what, about the third or fourth generation, those mice were still exhibiting, stress and trauma whenever they were introduced to the smell of cherry blossoms, which I thought was very interesting. Because in the Bible, it says that your generations will result in those same things for 3 and 4 generations. So I was thinking, they was on to something back then in the Bible. So sometimes when science actually proves what the Bible has already told us. So if we ever take a look at the Bible and see and hold it up to the light of science, sometimes that stuff commingles. So basically, science is proving nothing but what God has been telling us the whole time. There's a couple of other experiments I wanted to explain to you guys about too as well. Now, I'm going to show a video as well, so I want y'all to see this too. Give me just a second, and I'll bring this up. Now, this particular one is a little bit of a video to illustrate exactly how this works. So it's not only just the fathers, sometimes the mothers too. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. And this time it's going to be this video. So give me just a second. And I'll bring that up. Just a moment. And I'll share my screen with you guys.
Meet Lucky Lyle and Trouble Tim. Now, you might think they look a lot alike. That's because they're identical twins. But imagine them being raised in completely different environments. As adults, they turn out very differently. Lucky Lyle is a model citizen. He goes to work, pays his taxes, treats others well, and gets an education. Trouble Tim is on a different path. He robs banks, doesn't pay taxes, and gets his first prison sentence at the same time as Lyle gets his diploma. Their genes are identical, so it must be their separate environments that have made them so different, right? Well, there's more to it than that, much more. We need to rewind a bit in time. You see, one of the great questions of humanity is, what makes us us? Early explanations had a hint of the supernatural about them. As the centuries whizzed by, science emerged and fought a tough battle to gain credibility. Eventually, social science emerged with the popular theory that our environment is what makes us us. Let's call this nurture. Undaunted, the biological sciences presented another theory: genes, an unchangeable blueprint in you from birth, decides everything. Let's call this one nature. So, are we a product of our genes or of our environment? The battle raged on. Observations in a newer field of study suggest that both are partly right. This field is called epigenetics. It means above genetics and has to do with how nature and nurture interact. At the heart of this discussion is one simple question asked by researcher Michael Meany. What makes a good rat mama? Well, for a rat mother, nothing says love and care like some nice, vigorous licking. The higher the number of licks, the more love and the better the mama. With this in mind, the researchers compared two groups of rat mothers, one that licked their babies a lot and another that didn't. They found that when babies grew up, they carried their mama's behavior with them and passed it on to the next generation and the next one, and so on. But could it simply be that this particular group of rats was genetically predisposed to produce caring mothers? Well, to test this, the researchers took newborn babies from low-licking mothers and fostered them with high-licking mothers and vice versa. It turns out that if the mother is a high licker, the rat baby becomes a high licker too, regardless of whether it's genetically related to her or not. So genes really don't have anything to do with it then? In true scientific fashion, the researchers dove right into the brains of these rats to see what, if anything, was different in the brains of the babies of high-licking versus low-licking mothers. When they looked at genes that possibly play a role in motherly care, they found crucial differences. Newborn rat babies have clusters of molecules called methyl groups attached to these genes. These methyl groups silence the gene, effectively switching it off. The researchers discovered that while the methyl groups in rats from low-licking mothers were still attached, in the rats from high-licking mothers, these methyl groups had disappeared. This was also true for the rats that had been adopted by high-licking rat mothers. The care these rats received from their mothers actually physically altered their genetic expression. Now that's all fine and good for rats, but what about people? Well, the same is true for Lucky Lyle and Troubled Tim, and for you and me. The genes you're born with are the genes you've got. But lifestyle and environmental influences such as nutrition, exercise, smoking, stress, and love greatly affect your biology. These changes can actually be observed at the DNA level. The bright side is that epigenetic changes happen throughout our lives, and our choices can make real differences in how we develop as human beings.
So I thought I'd share that with you guys so that way you can see exactly what's going on. Here's my thing. Generally what happens is when we are in dating and mating situations, we rarely think about exactly, how we were nurtured. And we never talk about, those families. I don't know if y'all remember this or not. Whenever you had brought your little girlfriend home, the first thing your parents would ask you who they folks is. You know what I'm saying? They want to know who your people are. And 9 times out of 10, knowingly, not knowingly, what they wanted to know is, what type of background this person came from. Did they come from a nurturing, background? Did they come from a hard background? Because I don't know if y'all noticed or not, but people who are raised on love and people who are raised on survival act totally different. And 9 times out of 10, sometimes people will, hide who they really are. But sometimes there are things like genetics that play a part in that you have no idea what's going on. And also trauma. There's another, the reason why I use mice is because I wanted to lead into exactly how that may affect us as a people based upon previous traumas. Now, there is a study that I want to share with you guys as far as another mice situation. This one, I'm going to share my screen. This one is actually, I thought was very interesting. I don't know if you know about this or not. It was actually a experiment by a gentleman by the name of John Calhoun. Let me go ahead and share my screen and get into a little bit. I'm not going to play a video for that. I'm just going to explain to you guys the gist of it. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share Mr. Calhoun's experiment and share to you guys what's going on. Now, this is Universe 25. This was an experiment that took place from 1968 to 1973. Just to give you the heads up, this man had a rat apartment. So basically what he did was he put in a couple of pairs of mice and he gave them all the food, all the water that they could ever want. You know what I mean? I mean, it was just a big rat apartment. You know what I'm saying? Well, we're moving on now. You know what I'm saying? They can have everything they wanted. So basically, in this particular situation, what happened was all of the rats made it and had a good old time. They just, you know, they built whatever they needed to build. You know, they made other pups or whatever. So what happened was, after a while, it got kind of crowded. Regardless of how much food or water they got, it was basically overpopulation. So what happened was they started noticing different things. So some of the things that they noticed is that some of the mothers stopped caring for the young, and some of the male rats had a situation where all they wanted to do is sit around and groom themselves. So just to give you a situation, they used to call those rats the beautiful ones. Now, just to let you know a little bit about what happened, the colony actually collapsed after, I think it was like a few hundred days, until it got to the last one, and then the rats just decided, hey, we're just not going to have no more kids. So that whole entire colony just collapsed. So there's a video, and I'm going to link all this stuff in the description when I get through. I didn't want to spoil it for the rest of you guys, but just to let you know, this is what it looked like. They had mice everywhere. And just to think, all those mice just collapsed. They just stopped mating. You had other rats and stuff that were just highly aggressive. You know, they didn't want to, you know, do nothing but just take over. You know what I'm saying? And then you had rats that didn't want to have nothing to do with them. You know, with the women, they just wanted to just chill out and just groom themselves, and that's it. So I draw that parallel to what we're seeing today. If you notice that, according to some of the stats, that most men are single and don't have any children. So that is a precursor to something. You know what I mean? If you don't have any kids, then the population doesn't go on. They don't want to have nothing to do with dating no more. No, none of that stuff. So, and to me, that's sad, because that shows the basically inevitable collapse of society. We like to talk about, you know, what this person is not doing and this person is doing and all this other stuff. But in the grand scheme of things, we want to keep things going. Well, how do we stop that? You know what I mean? How do we fix that? And if negativity is one of the things that cause trauma, then love is going to have to fix it. Just like they can program negativity into people, well, guess what? You can actually program love in the other folks too as well. Now, just to draw a parallel from mice to men, there was another study that I'm going to share with you guys. This was from the Holocaust survivors. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with that one as well too, so that way you guys can see what happened in that particular situation. Give me a second. Here we go. Now I'm going to share my screen with you guys with this one. This one is, move this out the way. Study of Holocaust survivors find trauma passed on to their children's genes. Now, in this particular one says genetic changes stemming from trauma suffered by Holocaust survivors are capable of being passed on to their children. The clearest sign yet is one of person's life experiences can affect subsequent generations. Now, basically it goes on, it starts talking about how, you know, those children were affected due to the Holocaust and those concentration camps and things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to bore you guys with the details, but this is the article I'm going to pin into the comment section once I'm done, so you guys can reach it, so you can read it. Now, also, there's another one as well too, which basically pertains to us. And this one was how should I say this? The effects of slavery. So I'm going to share mine with that one too as well. So give me a second. And we're going to get into that, because that is a big one. Some people like to say, well, you know, slavery happened, you know, 400 years ago, that type of thing and the other. But sometimes things are not always what they seem. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with this one as well too. And just to give you guys a little bit of, this is a case study that they did, the psychological trauma of slavery, the Jamaican case study. Now, in this particular situation, they were talking about how slavery in the Jamaican colonies, Spanish colonies, back in 1492, due to horrific conditions endured by the indigenous genocide, occurred within a half a century, where the British later seized Jamaicans from the Spanish and forcibly fought over 600,000 Africans into Jamaicans in a Middle Passage. Basically, we're talking about how the trauma of slavery caused all kind of problems. And I'll link that in the description as well too, so you guys can watch it on your own. And those are some of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about. Is sometimes we have a particular proclivity in our situation where sometimes we may act funny for no reason at all. And sometimes that stuff is genetic and it's passed down. You never know why some people act the way they do. You never know what might trigger them. Some people have a particular reason why they date the type of person that they date, and they really don't know why. Sometimes it comes from a trauma that was experienced from a long time ago. So to add that to the current dating pool of your list of, I want my man to be 6 feet tall and all this other stuff. Now you got to make sure that this person comes from a good background, a good home to negate the effects of their past trauma. Sometimes you can have trauma that's expressed in genetics, and then sometimes you can have trauma expressed more recently, which leads me to believe that you're going to have to eventually, work that out. You know what I mean? Either you're going to have to go to therapy, or you're going to have to, talk with your loved one and say, hey, look, this is what I experienced throughout my life. And the more that you guys talk, the more you'll be able to open up and have open and honest conversations. I'm not really one to get into the gender wars or whatever that may be going on. So my thing is this: I want to make sure that everybody understands that you want to make sure that you use kindness from time to time. You know what I'm saying? And I'll give you examples. Say, for instance, one of the things that I noticed when you're dating someone, you want to make sure that you find out exactly who their folks are, how they were raised. You want to make sure that their mama was good to them. You know what I'm saying? You want to make sure that their daddy was good to them too. So those are some of the things that I noticed that we really rarely talk about as genetics and also trauma that people experience. So I've actually pinned the link to the top. If you guys want to come up and discuss it a little bit, you can. If not, we'll wrap everything up. So in the meantime, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes. Did you guys have any questions or anything you wanted to talk about before we go? Or before we hit, because I hit the link so you can come up if you want to. If not, I'm going to wrap everything up. If you have any questions, I'm going to put everything in the link so you guys can stay on. I'm going to let you have your Friday back. So if there's anyone, no, yes, maybe. If that's the case, we're going to wrap everything up. I'm going to leave it to my main man, Sweet Brother Rance. Sweet Brother Rance, come on up and bless the choir one more time.
Now give me my theme music.
All right. Thanks, everybody. This has been another episode of Lost in Translation podcast. And before you go, remember, if there's anything bad enough you want to go out and fight for, to work day and night for, to give up your time and your peace and your sleep for, and if all that you dream and scheme is about it and life seems useless and worthless without you, go out and sweat for it, fret for it, plan for it, lose all your terror of the opposition for it. And if it's simply go after the thing that you want with all of your capacity, strength and sagacity, faith, hope, and confidence, and stern pertinacity. If neither cold, poverty, famine, should gall, sickness, or pain, or body and brain, keep you away from the thing that you want. If dogged and grim, you besiege and beset it, and with the help of Almighty God, you get it. This has been another episode of Lost in Translation podcast. I really appreciate you guys for coming out, and I wanted to say thank you once again for coming out. Make sure you hit the like button on your way out, and good evening.
By His grace we are walking testimonies, for thine is the kingdom and